Hello, good evening. I hope everyone can hear me. If you can hear me, just reconfirm by text chatting. Good. I think we can start now. Good evening. Welcome to another session of webinar for the APC process. Today, the subject is health and safety competency for RICS APC process as well as AIQS APC process. The target required level is level 3. And myself, I'm Mohammed Riaz, working for a leading consultant in UAE and having experienced more than 10 years in the field. And my major role I'm playing for the pre-contract and certain claims and post-contract role, limited role I'm playing on the project, few projects. Today, the learning outcomes to start with in regards to health and safety competency, the first learning outcomes we target: gain a clear comprehension of personal responsibility for health and safety, comprehend the obligation placed on organization to manage health and safety, and identify the basic principle of risk assessment. The fourth one is recognize the practicalities of identifying, monitoring, and managing wide range of health and safety risk. And next learning outcome is gain an oversight of common risk to health and safety of the employees and those for whom you may become responsible in underlaying your work. And the final outcome, we target to undertake a sample audit of any firm that meet the RICS health and safety standard. How to do it? So the required level, all three, we will just go through all the level what RICS target to achieve in terms of competency level. And the level 1, the target in terms of level 1, the target is personal safety on site in the office. RICS is target to achieve as a competent quantity surveyor and procedure imposed by law. And the other category is specific regulation 11 the work area, specifically fire safety standards and the building standard in terms of safety. The other target is the impact on health and safety of design, construction process, and building and maintenance. Another outcome they're expecting in level 1 is health and safety training requirement as it relates to the employment of staff. When it comes to level 2, which is doing and showing experience, RICS targets to achieve obtaining formal health and safety qualification, including first aid, industry-specific, nationality recognized qualification, and being involved with specific roles and responsibility within the various regulation, being involved in specific health and safety audit reviews. We're going to have a look on that. And reviewing health and safety proposal as a part of contractor's tender. Coming to level 3 as a standard set out by RICS, what RICS is really looking for the understanding and advice on impact of design on construction and alternative construction process in terms of safety and impact of design on occupation maintenance and undertaking some risk assessment, advising on current legislation and advising on advocacy of health and safety allowance within the tender. These are the target set out in the competency level RICS and RICS requirement for the APC candidate. Now, coming to the construction as an industry and as a individual project, we have many risks coming to the health and safety. Most of them fall under 4 categories. We try to categorize under 4 categories, and we will look at the reason separately. And the first one falls ill health or injury or death. The second category, again in terms of health and safety risk, it's damage to the property or product or plant or environment. And third category, what we're trying to categorize health and safety risk is productivity losses. And the fourth one, which is the least one, because we try to protect or safeguard the workforce and property in terms of health and safety issues. But if unforeseen reason, if something happens, the fourth one, which is the increased or exposed liabilities, including associated additional cost. So these are the 4 likely health and safety categories in any project in construction, which may influence on overall outcome of the project. Why we talking about health and safety as an issue, as a parameter, as an issue, as a parameter? The reason purely the construction is the major industry when it comes to any country. Even it represent a considerable percentage in terms of GDP also. ILO, International Labour Organization, they estimate at least 60,000 fatal accidents in a year on construction site around the world, which means it's 1 in 6 of all fatal work-related accidents. So this purely shows that the construction industry is involving with many risks, is prone to the risk. This is the reason when it comes to the construction, there are many standards. It has been developed to safeguard the workforce as well as any harm to the environment also. Now let's look at the reason why the possible way that could have health and safety risk in the construction. The first one from working from height. The second, moving object. Moving object can be anything. Even the on site, there might be a truck or vehicle, it moves in and around. So that could cause any health and safety issues. Third one, slips and trips. This again, it can become under any categories. Slips and trips, even the slips and trips, the workman can do that. Workman can slips. Otherwise, the material can slip and fall from the top. The fourth category is noise. Any excessive noise can cause harm to the ear, and this can cause any health and safety issues to the overall health. Fifth category, and vibration syndrome. This is usually when the vibrator is used directly by workman, the vibration can pass to the body, and that can create safety related issues to the overall health condition of the workman. The sixth one is the material handling. So when material handle, there are few posture that should be followed for few heavy lifting machineries, or even the material to lift from one place to another place. So this can cause, due to the wrong posture, this can cause any safety related issues to the workman. The seventh category, unintended collapse. On site, there might be a collapse which is unintended. For example, the water tank, when you build water tank concrete wall, it can collapse due to many reasons. Maybe it could be design issues, maybe it could be construction issues, but any unintended collapse can cause damage to the site people or site property, site plant machinery. So this can cause any safety related issues. And the eighth category is asbestos. This again, it's depend on the material itself. This can harm the workman. We will have a look in detail few of these categories to identify the possible way how it can have an influence on the safety of site people at site. The ninth category, airborne, fibers, and toxins. we will have a look on detail. 10th, chemical or biological explosion or reaction. There are a few cases which happen at site due to the chemical reaction due to excessive heat generated by the weather. Then again, electricity, this can cause safety related issues at site or any construction project. Then the 12th, the last and not the least one, fires. This possibly cause, there are a few incidents which is landmark incidents happen in UAE. Fire can cause any safety, health and safety risk to any construction project. Now let's look at a few of the category we discussed in detail, just to see how this can influence the safety, health and safety issues at site. Asbestos is the naturally occurring rock mineral that has heat and fiber resisting properties. It has been used extensively worldwide in a wide range of building material. If you look at the picture, you can see there are many parts which is formed as a part of asbestos. If you see the roof sheets, this can be from asbestos. Then if you see the boiler vessels and pipe works, there are few legging on boilers. This is formed as a material wise asbestos. Then the ceiling, there are ceiling coating which is formed from asbestos material, and there are interior ID works which is panels and all. It comes from the foam is asbestos. There are flooring material. The many forms of material takes place in the form of asbestos in the construction project. So how it could cause a harm, because asbestos, as we know, is the material which has high related a mineral which can exposed and cause lung related issues if it's exposed. Coming to the chemical or biological explosion reaction, this could be for many reasons. At site, if you look at it, there are many chemicals at present stored for construction usage, which we can try to categorize on few elements just for the sake of examples. And this could even cause biological explosion or chemical reaction, and this can challenge health and safety of site. We will name few of them just for the sake of discussion and the knowledge. Pesticides, agrochemical, timber treatments, vermin baits in store or in use. This could cause a reaction, chemical reaction among them or in between them, then create safety hazards. Lead paint dust from abrasion or old painted surface, industrial solvents, respirable crystalline silica arising, dust produced when cutting brick, tiles, blocks, concrete, etc. Then engine exhaust fumes. Then we got dust and spores from decomposing vegetation, including molds. So these are the forms of how the chemical or biological explosion could happen at site, on a given site. So when we do the risk assessment, we will discuss how we do the risk assessment, and part of that, these are the considerations we should taking care when do the site risk assessment. Now coming to the airborne fibers and toxins, there are multiple sources of potential lung damage within the construction environment. These include dust caused by stone masonry, removing rubble, general site cleanup. Usually dust is formed any part of the construction site. In the moment when you have a cleaned up, when you clean, or especially when you have a removing rubble and general site cleanup, all the way dust is created. Then the other possible way, toxic fibers can become airborne when laying carpet. This carpet may be, again, as we discussed, can be made of asbestos, inhaling, which are used in paints, varnish, glues, flooring, building insulation material. All of them can form potential chemical which could cause damage to the lungs. Then we got various wood dust. So when you are cutting wood at site as a joinery works, Then various forms of dust could create from different material of woods. So this possibly could harm the lungs in the long run. So these are the factors coming to the airborne fiber toxin we discuss in detail. Then coming to the fires. If you look at fire as a basic fire, forget about the construction at site. The fire required three kind of base. One is a source of fuel, second is oxygen, and third a source of ignition. We will leave the questions to the last part, and we will possibly have questions and answer session to continue with any clarifications. We will run through this session, so we will leave enough time for the question and answers. Now, coming to the fire requires three basic forms to generate enough fire on site. The first one is source of fuel, the second one is oxygen, and third one a source of ignition. Usually fire could possibly, due to natural events such as lightning, could strike and create fire, or as a result of human error, it can create fire. Somebody smoke at site and throw the cigarette butt, and this could spread it in a way that the big smoke and fire. Then the other possible way, woodland, spread from woodland or grassland or crops or parkland, as well as other building environment. So somewhere it's fired and it could spread out to the construction site also. So these are the way fire can spread out. Now coming to all the things that we have discussed, what possibly could cost to any project if you have safety related accident, injuries and health? We'll try to categorize the cost in the form of category and see what's the impact in overall if you don't follow, or if you don't have enough safety standard, or if you didn't achieve the safety standard what is intended to the project. Coming to the accident or injury, if it's non-fatal or fatal, the loss we can categorize under 5 categories, and again the last and final one, there will be a 6th category that we will discuss now. First one is the productive. Definitely there will be a loss of productivity if there is an accident or injury. Then second category, which is the healthcare cost. The people need to spend money on recovering from the injury, or if there is fatal injury, then again the same category, you need to spend for this, and eventually you will end up paying extra money. Then the third category, which is the quality of life losses. If workman he loses his part or his leg, his hand or something, his quality of life is suffered forever. So this is also kind of loss. And the fourth one is the administration cost. This administration cost could form under many categories in terms of even dealing with legal cases, contractual way, then dealing with the insurance company. So all this comes under administration cost. And the final one, which is the insurance cost, eventually you need to pay higher premium if you're experiencing high number of cases in terms of health and safety, injuries and health. So these are the costs the company would suffer if there is any work-related accident, injuries or ill health or even the death. So eventually what will happen when you don't meet safety standard, you will eventually pay a higher premium when you renew your insurance in terms of workman compensation and third-party liability. We'll have a look in detail coming to the final part of today's discussion. And this could lead to high premium, and this could lead to your tender price, which you are pricing higher tender prices, and eventually you might lose the project because your price won't be competitive anymore. So this is the overall impact the health and safety could influence on any contractor tender pricing. Coming to the definitions part, which might be the level 1, you will be asked to answer few areas. The basic one, simply, what is risk? The risk is likelihood of any event or failure occurring and its consequence or impact. It's the probability. When somebody asks what is risk, it's the probability of event or failure occurring. So this is the simple answer we could give. And what is hazard? Something, the potential to cause harm to someone. So if there is any potential which could cause harm or even injury or ill health, that is called hazard. So the risk is the likelihood or probability, and the hazard is potential to cause harm to someone. And the general concept, safe person concept, which is RIC's guideline. What is safe person concept means? RICs consider concept of safe persons to mean that each individual assumed individual behavioral responsibility. So you take your own responsibility when it comes to safety. This is called safe person concept. And what is dynamic risk assessment? We need to have a definition on these categories before we move into the next subject. What is dynamic risk assessment? The risk assessment which we do eventually, or the last, if there is any change in environment. We have done already risk assessment, but before we execute the work, we just try to do one more time just to see everything is remain the same. If there is change in environment, then you have to do one more risk assessment, which is called dynamic risk assessment, which is the final assessment of risk prior to undertaking the work activity. Then coming to the toolbox talk. Toolbox talk is the construction industry. You will have a very short safety message before you start the work, which will address potential hazard, sharing the best practice, and keep advising the employee before they start their works. So this is represented in a mini group level on any activities. Then finally, fire drill. When we say fire drill, we can call it like a mock-up or practice in case if there is an emergency, how to react. So in fire drill, people will have a safety plan and evacuation plan, everything will be ready. If there is any emergency comes, okay, how to react. This is called fire drill. Now we'll move on to the next subject, which is the health and safety in design and construction. Now coming to the design stage, why health and safety is important for a design? There are many benefits, and each one of them we'll just have a look. The first one is it's reduce the work-related health and injuries. As we discussed, the impact on work-related injuries and health, you will eventually pay for that. So if you have a safety design, then it will reduce the work-related health and injuries. The second one, it will improvement in health and well-being of workers. If workers are fit, they will give them productivity, and you can achieve the target achieved productivity. Then third one, reduction in damage to the property and environment. If you have safety standard in design, it will reduce the damage to the property and environment. And you will try to choose the material, you will try to choose the method of construction and even the design itself, which we won't cause many harms. This is the reason we have choosing the material which sustainable to the environment. Many things will come into play in this, but when it comes to health and safety in design, this could potentially benefit reduction in damage to the property and environment. The other benefit we will have if you have safety design, elimination of potential hazard at the beginning of the project. Usually when you have a hazard or risk, if you deal from the start at the early stage, which will be more cheaper than once it's observed and it start to have an impact on the project. So the more you proactive and detect early and plan for that, the more you will save. We will discuss more about when it comes to the insurance on this advantage, this benefit part. Now moving to the next benefit we will have if we have a safe design, more efficient, effective risk management at the design. Usually as a designer, you will have, when you develop your design, together with that, you will have risk management and risk register. So as a designer, you'll start to plug all the potential or possible risk that could come into the project, and you'll start to prioritize that, and you will more keen on even during construction to see how it has been eliminated or how it has been dealt. Then eventually you will reduce the impact. The last benefits you could see the reduction in operational maintenance and litigation cost when things go wrong. If the things already went wrong and will end up paying huge price for that, including litigation and the legal expenses, plus the fine penalties and the compensation. So if you have a safety in design, all of these benefits you can get it. Now coming to the graph, if you want to draw as a graph and to show in terms of the cost and safety hazard risk, you will see all the way from concept to demolition. So when you deduct from concept stage, the cost will be more cheaper. Then you will plan for that. You will you the risk register, you will do the risk assessment, and you will pass on to the contractor. From that moment, contractor will take care of the risk. This will be dealt as a team, and impact will be reduced or minimized. But if you deduct at the construction stage, you will see the cost is comparatively higher than the concept stage. The same way, if you deduct the concept, if you design for that, the safety, higher safety, then later part of the project, coming to the construction and demolition, if we try to implement the design, the safety in the design, so which will be not more safer than doing in the concept. So this is the graph if you want to draw it in terms of the cost and the ability of design influencing on the overall project. Coming to the checklist, we supposed to have as a competent designer. If you are designing for any project, it could be mixed use, it could be a hotel, it could be villa, simple villa, but you're supposed to have a checklist. This checklist will provide a comprehensive checklist for and to verify as a designer whether everything has been considered or addressed in the design. So a few of the categories just listed for the sake of today's discussion. Coming to the electric safety, and you start earthing of electrical installation, location of underground and overpower cables, protection of lead cables, number and location of power points. These are the factors you will see as a checklist, and if everything has been considered safely, then you will tick, then this has been done. This has been needs to be signed off by design manager for the respective project. Then this will pass on to the client HSE team, and they will take over. Coming to the fire emergencies, they are in fire risk, fire reduction, firefighting, emergency route and exit plan, access for structural capacity to carry fire tenders, other emergency facilities. All of these will be considered and will be taken care of during the design. Coming to the movement of people and materials, you're supposed to have safe access plan and the traffic management plan, loading bays and ramps, safe crossing, exclusion zones, site security. Usually these will be discussed in the form of specs, and this will be discussed in detail by the designer, how the things has to be dealt in terms of traffic management, loading bay, RAM, safe crossing. The basic idea is just to have a checklist in terms of all possible risk and hazards. And this is something which is directly impact on the design as a drawing itself. Something needs to be taken care in the specs. Coming to the tender and construction stage, how the health and safety to be dealt, and we will discuss in detail. Now, before you shortlist the contractor, for any project, you're supposed to have a pre-qualification, and the pre-qualification will give us more detail on contract health and safety issues. Maybe there is pre-qualification questionnaires. This will give in details recent health and safety issues or compliance or fine related charges by authority. Those information will be filled by the contractor. So this will give a guidance or idea about how the safety standards are placed by a contracting firm for any project. So the pre-qualification document will give a detailed idea on this. Then the second one, you can have a look as a part of technical submission from the contractor. Is there an health and safety policy signed by the managing director? Usually, this is the prioritized documents. You need to have a policy, health and safety policy signed by managing director. This will be a sound document to say the company is having concern on safety standards. Then you can have a look on the organization chart and to see is there any full-time health and safety manager and is there any separate health and safety team in place. So this will give an idea on the competency on the contractor side, whether he has a safety standard in place. Then you can see when you go through the technical submission or pre-qualification submission, you can go and see in detail, is there any training has taken place recently or regular training are in place in terms of health and safety. So this will give overall idea how the contractor giving priority for the health and safety. Now coming to the submission itself, this is technical, what we discussed is technical. Coming to the submission itself for the commercial side, as a QS, when you receive the price BOQ by the contractor, you're supposed to have a look on the claims, and the claims already the BOQ is prepared by the QS. But if there is no like a breakdown which related to items that are supposed to be by the contractor, if it's lumped together, then you might ask the contractor to produce under few categories how much he has taken the prices for each element. So this can give an indicative idea how much the safety standards in place by the contractor. So this can give an idea how much the contractor understanding and the safety standards to be followed in the project. So there are a few categories which you can have a look how much the contractor is priced, each contractor is priced. So this can give idea on the safety standard of the contractor. The third one is the standard documents the contractor already in place to record reporting accidents, incident, near misses and all. And also now the standard practice in Dubai and maybe other part of the world also to introduce two envelope submission. One is purely for technical and one is purely for commercial. And when you have a technical documents and you will have a checklist of the document which you, the consultant or the client require contractor to submit. And one of them is definitely is QAQC and health and safety. Out of 10, 15 documents, these two will be there. So in that, you can have all the information which we have discussed to assess and see is the contractor is competent in terms of health and safety. Moving to the item that could give the indication that how much the standard in place by the contractor, you could ask the contractor to give the breakdown of health and safety supervision team cost and breakdown of provision of temporary protective works like scaffolding, hoardings, Then hiring of qualified safety officer, if they do a third-party audit from third-party firm, they're coming to the site and do the audit. If they pricing this also in the part of tender price, this could give an indication. So how the important the safety when it comes to the contractor. And provision for the safety training, you can ask to give the breakdown, how much it has been priced in this project. Then provision for welfare and facilities like water, food, housing and all. And the provision for the PPE, which we call personal protective equipment, and the medical examination, first aid, emergency facilities, and nursing facilities at site. These are the categories you could ask contractor to give the breakdown out of preliminary cost, total cost, how much he has been considered under these categories. This could give indication commercially. As a QS, you can still evaluate contractor health and safety in place. Since we talk about all the safety issues and the provisions, the importance in safety, when you ask the contractor to consider the safety standards, usually the price is going to be plugged in the prelims, in the form of prelims, or in the some other connected activities in the unit rate. So if you see in the long run, this would benefit the whole industry. Construction as a whole industry, it will benefit. There are possible ways. Usually when you start with the very first year, you will eventually pay for the health and safety provisions. And the next year, if the contractor already set up the standard, so he will price for the same standard, but with the reduced cost. If he keep achieving the safety standard, the next third year, he will reduce his prices in the tender. Then if it's continuing the similar way as an industry in a country, the safety will be achieved and the price will be competitive. So this is the overall target. So once the standard is achieved, and to maintain that, the contractor will not price as he used to price, or he used to price in the year one. So accordingly, when you achieve the safety standard in a country, what will happen? You will have a main source of savings under 5 categories. You will have the reduced insurance premium because the insurance company will not charge you more to provide the policy because you're already having a high standard in place. So that there will be a less claim on the insurance. So the premium will be reduced. And the second advantage, savings you could have, you will have a less disruption to work schedule, less disruption to work, and you will achieve your milestone. This will benefit overall as a company. Now, the third benefit of savings you could achieve, higher labor productivity as workers feel more secure. Once the labor is prone to less risk, less hazard and safety hazards, so they will feel more secure. So this will improve their feeling and they will reflect in the productivity. And you will see there will be less likelihood of work stoppage. So this will again improve the productivity. And the fifth one, diminish risk to their reputation. If the contractor is maintaining a high standard in the market, okay, your name will be there. So it will diminish your risk to their reputation, contractor reputation. So these are the main source of savings you will have. So you will have a reputation as a contractor, competent contractor, and the safety standard in place. So we will be highly categorized by the client. So this is the main source of indirect and direct savings as a contractor you could achieve in maintaining safety standard. Now we'll have a look few of safety design in construction methods. Now placing air conditioning unit at ground floor rather than height. This is also considered to be safety. When it comes to safety, you can still place on air with the holding bar, but now placing on ground, you are eliminating risk of falling from the height. Second one is, if you look at the picture, design safe access method to service areas such as roofs. So this is one of the safety approach considered by the design parameter. Now coming to the construction part, now if you look at the picture, fold down light eliminate the risk of working at height. So you will see this fold down height, the height, total height is reduced. So you will eliminate the risk of working at height. Now looking at this window, the window can be opened from inwards, then outwards. So the cleaning is more easier compared to outside. Maybe you need to still reach to the window and have a clean. This could potentially cause any safety, health and safety related issues. Now, coming to the on-site, now you'll have a self-contained water flushing toilet block built-in tank. So you'll have a separated built-in tank which set up. This is show the safety standard. Then you have a higher sink with the large enough people to wash their forearms. So if you have a sink which you can place your fully hands, so hygienic related issues and safeties concern has been cleared. Coming to the ladder has been tied in the window, so it won't move. So it potentially remove the hazard of movement from ladder. And coming to the mobile elevating work platform to replace roof sheets. So rather you climb on the roof and do the works, you'll use the mobile elevating work, which is a safer method to replace the roof sheets. Then you have the safety harness, which is fastened. And now with that, you continuing your work. So you are connected to the steel guardrail, so you are more safer. Coming to the cleaning part, you have a longer pole, and using the longer pole, you cleaning now, and this you are avoiding from work at height. And look at this, all the garbage rubbish has been categorized and cleared and properly racked. This will avoid any safety related issues on construction site. So these are a few examples. You can have a look, and there are many more. When you visit the site, you will have a you possibly have a look on many standards in place by the contracting firm. Now coming to the second section, which is purely to discuss about theoretical part, which are health and safety standards and requirement. Now, who can influence the health and safety standard and requirement? We can categorize under four parties who can influence health and safety standard and requirement to any country or any industry. The first one to that is the law or act, or time to time there will be circulars from local authorities. In UAE, we say circulars from local authorities. In time to time, different countries, they issue different memos to safety standards. So they can have an influence on the safety. The second category is the parties to the contract. Parties to the contract, they can influence health and safety standard and requirement. The third category, which is the regulator, we call it regulator, but they can form in different ways. RICS is the regulator. They are the firm to provide chartered qualification to any firm and to the individual. So they can influence on health and safety standards, as well as ISO, OSH. Those are the people, they have certain requirements. If you need to have a certificate from them, you need to maintain certain standards. So they can have influence. This is the third category. And the fourth category who can influence the health and safety standard is the management of any companies, including the CEO, promoters. So the company on its own, they can have safety standards and requirements. These are the four parties, they can have influence on the health and safety standards and requirements. Coming to the safety standards specifically to the UAE, the United Arab Emirates has signed a technical cooperation agreement with the International Labour Organization. We call it ILO. to provide decent working condition within the federation. The major component of the agreement include protection of the workers' rights, development of national employment policies and monitoring system as well as. So the extra steps UAE went on and signed the technical cooperation agreement with the labor organization ILO to provide safe working place for any workman coming to the UAE. In addition to that, there are a few standards you may be supposed to list in the level 1 questions to list UAE legislative resolutions, laws related to health and safety standard. We will name it few and we will read it quickly before we move to the next country, which is Qatar, and the final one, which is part of RSC's requirement, UK. The labor law, federal law 1980, which is provides detail on safety standard. And there is a ministerial resolution number 32-18982, which preventing employees being harmed by hazard in the workplace. There is one more resolution, again 1982. It's purely for medical care and employer. Then further ministerial resolution, which is 1981, concerning limitation of working hours. And again, one more ministerial resolution, which is prohibition of minors from working. So there is an age limit. So this is a ministerial resolution issued 1981. And further resolution, which is issued concerning prohibition of women working in defined hazardous industries. So the woman working in defined hazardous industries has been defined, and there is prohibition in place. One more resolution issued 1981, which is the remote working allocation in Dubai and Northern Emirates. And continuing with the UAE, there is a fire life safety code and practice. This, as certain safety standards and requirement to be followed, is a mandatory requirement. And time to time, there are circulars from UAE authorities to be followed by construction industry. And Dubai Municipality Code of Construction Practice, this is specify the responsibility, working condition for worker and then safety on site. Then we got Dubai Municipality Technical Guidelines. It shows rope access, emergency preparation, electricity safety at work, especially discussed in detail. Then etc. There are many more, which as safety, which influence health and safety in the construction related project. Coming to the specific discussion on what is the requirement in UAE coming to the health and safety, we'll go back to the labor law, and which Title 5 contains Article 91 to 101, which specifically talking about what's the safety requirement for the industry. The Article 91 purely providing worker with educated protection and against hazards. So it's purely Article 91 is for the protection against hazard. So employer has to make sure that they provide educate protection against hazard and subsequent injuries and diseases. Article 92 purely talking about signs to warn employees of present specific hazard. So there should be a, indirectly it says there should be a safety risk assessment in place to warn the employee in terms of hazards, including the fire and all. Article 93, it's talking about the first aid boxes. Article 94, it's talking about clean and ventilated workplace. If there is site accommodation provision, so there is site rest area, you need to have a ventilated workplaces. Article 94 is talking about that. Article 95 is talking about requirement to record medical examination for every employees every 6 months. Article 96 is talking about medical care for employees. This is again linked to the provisions to have a medical insurance for the employee. So these are the just few health and safety requirements in UAE. If anyone asks what is the health and safety requirements in UAE, there are many laws, you can list it down, and together with that, you can more discuss on the few requirements related to the articles. And there is one more, specifically Fire Life Safety Code of Practice. There were a few key changes following, if you remember, there was the address hotel close to Dubai Mall has got fire on New Year 2018, if you remember rightly. And following that, there were a few legislation has been updated, including the circulars. Time to time they have updated and issued. And the key changes are in fire safety standard in UAE, requirement of spandrels for all building except low-rise and open parking structure. So the spandrel for all buildings has been encouraged. Previous concession for sprinkler protected buildings is not applicable as per the revised code. Balconies are required to provide with fire sprinkler protection. Now the balconies are required to provide with fire sprinkler. GRC cladding is required to be tested as a product assembly similar to ACP cladding. Even GRCP needs to go through with the test certificate like similar to ACP cladding. And emergency vehicular access required at least 25% of tower perimeter when located above podium. This is the new requirement for fire life safety code. And reduced requirement of fire pump sets, fire water storage duration, and the fire water storage duration has been reduced. Concession on fire protection of electrical telephone rooms, requirement for smoke detection and alarm system even in private villas. Usually we had in private villas, they don't recommend now as a new legislation, they need to have a smoke detection and fire alarm in private villas too. So these are the few changes in UAE Fire Life Safety Code of Practice. Just for the sake of knowledge, and there were few, if you look at the newspapers, there were a couple of times safety violations which come into the picture, and the randomly authorities go for a, like we can call it like a on-site audit, and they found few construction firms which didn't follow safety standard has been fined. So like few articles which shows the role of legal authority, regular respective authorities' roles which influence the health and safety standard. Coming to the Qatar, now Qatar has its own labor law, which is 1962 law number 3. Time to time it's updated, and we got law 30 of 2002 and road traffic law there with the list of violations. Then we got Qatar construction specific QCS 2014 and the recent one. Under labor law, like we discussed in UAE law, under labor law, take all necessary precautionary measures to protect workers from all injury. This is what labor law encouraging for the employer. Inform workers at the beginning of their employment about any occupational hazards and existing or future measure to be implemented. This is purely, again, similar to UAE standard, and provide good ventilation in the workplace, including suitable similar to UAE standard. And there is a specific one, provide workers with first aid facilities and carry out regular medical checkup, appoint full-time nurse if there are more than 100 workers at given site, designated clinic if the workers are exceeding 500. So if any big project, they're supposed to have a clinic as per the Qatar standard. So these are a few safety related things you can highlight in level 2. Coming to the QCS 2014, there are a few requirements to be followed as a safety plan. And one of them is the emergency response plan. You need to have a emergency response plan in place as a part of QCS requirement, which will include responsibilities, risk assessment, hazard identification and control, coordination with emergency organization, arrival of outside emergency response equipment, crisis management plan, evacuation procedure, medical facilities, site fire prevention and all. So as a part of the standard itself, QCS, the contractor is supposed to have emergency response plan. So this is how the safety has been addressed in Qatar as a legal requirement. There are many more time-to-time circulars and related laws. Just we discuss few as a part of our discussion. Coming to the UK, we have many more, but the major one is Health and Safety Work Act and Construction Design Management Regulation, CDM. We simply call it CDM 2015, which more on talking about how the safety to be maintained in all stages. As a part of the competency, we're supposed to have knowledge on CDM, not to the full level, at least the basic, who are the parties and how the safety has been addressed in place for the CDM. And we got commercial client and domestic client. The client has been divided into two. Then we have a designer also, and we have a principal contractor and subcontractor. As a client, you supposed to arrange managing project. Relevant information is prepared to provide other duty holder, the principal designer and principal contractor have duty welfare facilities. As a client, you need to make sure that you provide the safe welfare facilities to all the parties to the project. Coming to the principal designer and designer, you need to make sure you design with a safety standard in place, including the preparing risk register, identifying potential risk from the concept stage itself. But you can have a more discussion on this, but the general idea is the designer needs to follow safety standard for the design too. Contractor has been emphasized to provide construction phase plan, construction safety plan, and also he needs to plan to the work-related method statement to the safety standard listed in Work Type 1974 and CDM regulation. So the contractor will make sure he construct the works as per the safety standard in place. Coming to the legal liability in UAE, okay, all this time we have been discussing about the health and safety requirement, standards, and potential possible risk in the health and safety. Now, the finally, eventually, we'll see if something goes wrong, what could possibly cost the contractor or the employer or any party who caused the health and safety injuries or risk to the project. In UAE, liability has been categorized under different heading, but we have a DIA, we call it blood money. If there is loss of life and 200,000 needs to pay as a blood money, then you have ARSH, we call it loss of body parts or organ, which we need to pay with the different scale, depend on the case outcome. But it's usually pay if depend on the case, but usually pay if some of them lost 2 legs, they end up paying the similar to dia money. Then we got different category which is emotional damage in UAE, and we got loss of future earnings. Loss of future earnings. It's when we have the insurance, we'll discuss final part. We'll talk about more in detail. This is the liability provision in UAE, including there is a provision for the sentence to the jail 5 to 10 years. This is the one. Any breach of health and safety obligation is punishable by fine up to 100,000, 10,000, and imprisonment for up to 6 months. It is related to the labor law, and fines can be levied against the organization. However, it is the organization official who could face the imprisonment. So we have to discuss the loss of earnings when it comes to the final part of the insurance subject. When we have workman compensation policy, we'll discuss in detail. Now, what we discuss is the legal requirement for the health and safety. Now, the second category, which is the parties to the contract, they can influence the health and safety in contractual way. Now, coming to pure form of FIDIC, 1987 Red Book, 8.2, which is talking about site operation and method of construction. Now, 8.2 clearly states the contractor shall take full responsibility for the adequacy, stability, safety of all site operation. So the contractor has taken full responsibility. According to the FIDIC, on site is the guy, he needs to take care of the safety of all the people who are at site, including the property. 19.1 in FIDIC pure form, it says the contractor shall throughout the execution and completion of the works and remedying of any defect therein. The A, have full regard to the safety of all persons entitled to upon the site. B, provide and maintain its own cost all lights, guard, fencing, warning signs, and C, take all reasonable steps to protect the environment in offsite and avoid damage, nuisance to the persons or to property. So 19.1 in detail, it gives the contractual requirement. The contractor needs to adhere safety standards. And if you look at 40.1, this is the interesting subclause. If there is no safety at site, the engineer can suspend the work. So this give the tool engineer can suspend the works. He can give the notice if there is no proper safety precaution not followed or not addressed, then he will go through the contractual provision for the suspension. So this is the highest level before termination. If there is no safety followed in the kind of, so FIDIC address more detail the safety requirement site, and even though law says working hours, restriction of working hours, and the FIDIC also to address 40.5.1, subject to any provision of the contrary contained the contract, none of the work shall have hereinafter provided be carried out during night or locally recognized days of rest. So it's tried to emphasize on the resting provision, even though it's addressed in detail in legal law, the law of the local law of the countries, but FIDIC as a comprehensive provision regards to the health and safety. Now coming to the 64.1, which is talking about again safety related clause. If by reason of any accident, failure or event occurring to in connection with the works, any part thereof, either during the execution of the works, during the defect liability, any remedial work, other works in the opinion of the engineer, urgently necessary for the safety of the work. So if there is any work which is urgent remedial work required in regards to the safety of the works, contractor needs to carry out. It has been written as obligation in the contract. So what Felix trying to emphasize the safety standard all the time at site on the contractor's shoulder. He's taking the liability, and he's the one needs to take all the precaution when it comes to the safety standards. This is the contractual provision. These are the parties to the contract. They can amend this and they can write more on part 2 if they prefer to emphasize more on the health and safety standards. So in pure FIDIC forms, the safety standard already been set out, and this is the second categories of who can influence health and safety standard requirement. The third one is the firms which like ISO, RICS, AIQS, they have their own standards to be followed at workplace, and as an individual, you need to make sure as a RICS chartered, say once you become, or if you are a RICS chartered surveyor, there are safety standards already in place for the RICS. So these people like ISO, they have a certain standard. If you meet only, they are issuing the certificate, which is the ISO standard certificates. So these are the indirect way they have influence on health and safety standards. Now the fourth category of people who can have influence on health and safety standard is the management of the company, the promoter, the owner of the company itself. It's a ethics, it's a business ethics. If you the workers are taking care of your business, and you need to simply taking care of the people who provide you all their lifetime, all your targets to be achieved. They are working purely for the mission of the company. So it's a business ethics, and these are the people, they set their own health and safety standard according to their organization, in addition to the legal provision and the contractual provision, which are to be dealt under separate contract. So these are the four categories of people who could influence on health and safety standards. Now we're moving into the third category, or we can call it third area of today's discussion, which is the risk assessment. In this chapter, what we're trying to see is how to do a risk assessment, and we will also see how RIC is chartered QS. You could do auditing when it comes to health and safety standard for any organization. Now the risk assessment is just nothing. It's the how could you plan action which deviates from your expectation. What is risk assessment? If someone asks, this is essentially consider how could a plan of action deviates from expectation. So this is simply RIC is already defined. Examining what is in your work could cause harm to the people, so that you can judge whether or not you have taken enough precaution to prevent harm. Now there are 6 steps this needs to be followed for any risk assessment. This is risk 6 has been in different forms of books and lectures, has been expanded or shortened, but since we're following the RICS, they have categorized 6 steps which needs to be considered in any of the risk assessment. The first one is the identify the hazards. So we need to identify all possible hazards. The second, decide who might be harmed and how. Third one, evaluate the risk and decide on precautions. The fourth one, record the findings and implement them. Fifth steps, review the assessment and update if necessary. Sixth, advise all those affected of the outcome of the assessment and method of other control measures necessary to minimize elimination. In simple words, 6 is the lessons learned. Fifth is the review of assessment. Usually, the risk assessment has been carried out since the day the concept design in place. So the designer is preparing risk assessment schedule and transfer it to the contractor. Then contractor take on and go ahead and keep record on each risk against the progress, the status, we call it closed, open, impacted, something you will write on the remarks. Then once it's done, the risk is passed or already risk is successfully mitigated, then you will have a lessons learned, which is the 6 steps. These are the 6 steps of risk assessment according to the RICS. Then we got hierarchy of risk control. Hierarchy of risk control is simply how the risk could be controlled. The first category, again, whatever we're discussing here on purely RICS standards, and there might be a different hierarchy of risk control when you read different books and other materials, but we following now RICS accordingly. 5 categories of hierarchy of risk control. First one is the elimination. You could eliminate simply the risk. This is the one of the risk control method. And second method is substitution. You can simply substitute another risk with the lesser impact. The third one, engineering control. Fourth one, administrative control. The fifth one, you can still go on and continue the work with the PPE in place, which is the protective cloth and equipment. So these are the risk control, hierarchy of risk control. If you want to be more specific substitution, if you go on reading, replace the material used or proposed work process with less hazardous one, as we discussed. So these are the risk control method. Simply you can eliminate or substitute or engineering control, or you can have administrative control and simply follow the safety standard and equipment to go ahead with the works. Now coming to the types of risk assessment, usually in construction, you will have more than like 10,000 or thousands of activities, but each activity supposed to have different type of risk assessment. You can't have the same risk assessment for different activities. For example, if you are dealing with asbestos and if you're dealing with first aid requirement to be placed in site, you cannot have the same risk assessment because each carries different forms of risk and each could impact different way and each could contribute different cost if it realize or if it occur. So accordingly, the risk assessment to be done different way for each risk. This is the pure reason. For example, working at height, first aid, fire safety, use of mobile, manual handling, asbestos, driving at work, and management, transport. All these categories, just for the sake of example we're giving, you cannot have one set of risk assessment. You're supposed to have a risk assessment according to the impact and the activity in place. Now the types of risk assessment we could divide into 2 parts, quantitative and qualitative approach. Quantitative risk assessment, usually you will have in the form of data which is translated into the graph, and again, there is a tree analysis. You will have events which is listed down and how it could have a link on each event. If there is any risk goes to one event, how this can have impact on event 2 and 3 and 4. This is form of mathematics. This is quantitative approaches. Then we got qualitative approach, which is purely you will have the ranking and the frequency you will categorize. We will go in detail qualitative approach to see how we do risk assessment. And we got indicator-based approach, which we don't use in the construction project, but this has been in practice for different sectors like oil and gas. We will have a look or sample on qualitative approach, how we do risk assessment. Now, coming to the risk assessment, as we discussed, we got tree analysis, quantitative risk assessment, risk metric approach, indicator-based approach. Each comes with its own advantage and disadvantage. Quantitative risk provide quantitative risk information that can be used in cost-benefit analysis of risk reduction measures. This is an advantage, but the disadvantage is the data is demanding, difficult to quantify. The probability it can be wrong is compared to the other analysis highly, and hazard intensity and vulnerability. So these are the advantages on each category. Even tree analysis allow modeling of sequence events, which, as we discussed, one event, if it's affected, how this will have an impact on the other events. This could provide the overall picture on particular risk, but again, it's the difficult to assess. You might have event number one experiencing 80% of the risk transfer as in terms of cost and time. The other event might not come to the same impact. So there are advantage and disadvantage. We can have a read when we have the theory part, which we'll share once we finish the lessons. Now we'll do more on the qualitative approach, how we do qualitative analysis when it comes to the risk assessment. We can have a ranking, very high, medium, low, very low. Set out the probability ratio is 75%, 99% is very high, and the high 50 to 75%, medium 25. This is the probability you could give, and you can categorize even the project cost. If it has 2% on the cost of the construction project, if could impact 2%, then you can divide the category as very high, and you can change this according to your interest to the project and the parameter or the discussion with the project team. If this event could cause overall 5% delay to the project, so 2% on the cost, 5% on the project, you can categorize as very high if something could really seriously affect the project. But it's individual requirement. You can set this 2% cost to the 5% and program 5% to 2%, depend on your requirement. But something similar parameter you need to set to define what is very high, what is medium, what is low, what is very low. Accordingly, you can start to rank, and we'll have a look on how one examples as done for the risk assessment. Then you can start to give the color, which can give a snapshot of the risk which has been listed in the risk register or risk assessment. The red one will give the unacceptable one, which you need immediate attentions. You should eliminate or transfer it. We will coming to the risk, dealing with risk separately. We'll also discuss under chapter 4, which is the purely insurance. And you might give a color of like orange, which highly undesirable. Then you will have a yellow, you can have a manageable, and the green one, which is negligible, which is a minimum impact on the project. Otherwise, it won't unlikely to happen. Like you can set the colors also. Once you set down the categories, then you can highlight with the colors. So it's easy to pick when you have a look on the risk register. This is the one sample of risk assessment has been done for any given project. Like now you will have title. The first one is root conflict. And if you want to be more specific, you can give the ID. So it's easy to deal with the risk ID. So you can simply communicate like 110. And you can start to have categories also if you want. functional specification for developing route. This is what has been written here. You can have a status then once it's active, or if it's not active, it's closed. You can say, so it's easy to track. Then type, is it hazard or risk? It's a risk here. Then you'll give more detail about the description. There is a risk that new road layout at St. Street John Green conflict with the phase 2 route. So this is the risk. Cause of risk, what caused this risk to be appeared or risk to be considered, you can simply write the major cause. The reason is later, if you can eliminate the major cause, then you can probably avoid the risk. The phase 1 is constructed at the route St. John's Green. So this have influence on this risk. So simply you will have a cause of risk. Then you will give detail more about the consequence of risk or benefit or opportunity. Some risk it comes with opportunity, some risk it comes with the benefits. So it's again depend on the scenario. You can have more detail on this. So the impact on this, the specific risk we discussing route conflict, additional cost of design and construction. So it causing additional cost of design and construction. And the proximity of impact, pre-construction. You can have a stage on concept, pre-construction, construction, and testing and commissioning and maintenance life cycle. You can have which stage it likely to have an impact. Then you have a qualitative approach, which is purely probability, cost, time, report, event in NHS. So you can rank on probability, then you can start to categorize in terms of cost, in terms of time, in terms of even environmental, then health and safety issues. Then you will have a pre-mitigated risk score. Okay, again, you will give the probability, and the cost part, you will approximately estimate how much the cost you would suffer if the risk is activated. So this gives the overall idea, and the color code you will see here, the orange color, which is the second category next to the red, which is undesirable again, but it gives the overall picture where your focus supposed to be. In green one, you will still have on the register, but you will rather focus on more on red than orange one. So this is how you do the risk assessment for any given project. You start to have the code and title and more about the risk, and you will start to have a ranking on this and with the cost impact and the likely case scenario and the severity of the risk. This is the typical risk assessment register and template. Then in design usually it comes from designer point of view, but again it has been shared with the contractor for if the contractor also do the maintenance. Look at the HVAC system, the possible risk, chill water interrupt likelihood, unlikely to occur. In this case, we haven't done similar to the RSA standard, which the color codes and scoring. But again, this is technical team would give overall image this. Then as a QS, we will start to fill with the cost impact part and the likelihood with the more information, like the similar to what we discussed in the previous slides. So let's read one example to see how the technical team is trying to do risk assessment. HVAC system, chill water interrupt, likelihood, unlikely to occur, impact, very high impact. They're talking about the impact in terms of cost, even in terms of technical severity. Now look at the risk mitigation plan. Chill water back up to the consider to the project as emergency to serve the required area. However, we have raised the question to the authority if they already have backup load emergency to utilize for the project. So there is a safety risk mitigation in plan. So if something goes wrong, they will try to activate the mitigation plan. So this needs to be translated into the form of the RSA standard template. If you are a QS, chartered QS is supposed to have a detailed risk assessment similar to this, translating the technical feedback you received from your design team into this elemental wise with the color code, which represent the more clarity on the risk. Now coming to the risk apportions, as we discussed, you could simply hierarchy of risk control, eliminate risk, substitute, engineering control, administrative control, and personal protective clothes and equipment. Use this simply to avoid an undesirable outcome. But coming to the NRM, which is again RIC's publications, this clarifies how the risk to be apportions to deal with more precious way. First one, you can simply avoid the risk. If there is a risk, you can simply avoid it and you can reduce it. Like as we discussed, use alternative construction method or alternative materials, or plan a different way of doing design. This is the risk reduction. And third one, risk transfer to the contractor, like similar to the contractual arrangement when you draft the contract, okay, and you will foresee all the risk and probably you could transfer some of the risk to the contractor. So this is one of the way you do the risk transferring. And in the other way, you share the risk with the contractor and the contractor. So both the people carry the risk. For example, when you have a professional quantities in the BOQ, the usually lump sum contractor carries the risk in quantities, but when you have professional quantities, quantity risk lies with the client, but the rate is fixed. So contractor risk is with the rate and the client risk is with the quantity. So this example for the risk sharing by both employer and the contractor. And then risk retention by the employer. If you wish, okay, probably when you pass to the contractor, he might inflate the tender price. The client is probably would like to keep the risk with them. So this will have an impact on tender prices. So these are the 5 ways, according to the NRM, you can have a risk assessment. Now, coming to the final part, which is the insurance. Before we move on to the question and answer session, the insurance, we will discuss more about how the contractual requirement for the insurance and how the certain risks are in place to deal with contractor and to deal with the employer. Now let's move on to the first categories of insurance policy as per the FIDIC. You're supposed to have insurance for the works, which include the material and plant, for all the events, for all the risk to the full cost plus 15% thereof. So this is the first category, which is the contractual risk policy usually cover this. Contractual risk policy usually cover this, and we will discuss more in detail. The second category of policy, insurance policy, we have safety of all persons, which is including death, injury to them. Then exception we will discuss separately when we coming to the specific insurance. The third category, safety of all person, which not safety of safety of property. This is supposed to be read as safety of property. And second one and third one together, we can say third party liability insurance, we can call it together. And the fourth category is safety of contractor workman staff. This is own staff, and he's supposed to have workman compensation policy for that. And the fifth one, safety of subcontractor workman staff. Subcontractor is supposed to have his own workman insurance policy for his own staff. And then we got contractor equipment. FIDIC defined contractor equipments, not the contractor plant, for the equipment used at site. Then we got PI insurance. FIDIC doesn't define this, but this is a requirement. If the contractor is designing certain portion of the work, he needs to provide PI insurance, which we need to obtain for respective design. So these are the like 7 categories of familiar policies in the construction industry. In addition to that, we will have a few more insurance in the course of discussion. The first one we'll discuss, the very famous one is car policy, contractor all risk. According to the FIDIC, is the insurance for the works, including material and plant. And the limit, if you want to discuss the limit is the full replacement cost plus 15% thereof. It doesn't talk about contract price, it says the full replacement cost. And there's a reason for that, and it depends on how the project is running on the cycles of the economy. Usually when you have a crisis time, the tender price usually be the lowest. compared to the when your economy cycle is on the peak. Usually the project cost usually higher. So especially in competitive nature, if you're getting the project, the cost of construction will be less compared to the period where the economy is on the higher side and all the prices skyrockets, then you'll have end up paying too much. So you need to be very careful if you are experiencing similar situation on the cycles of the economy, and if you are signing the contract which is like 30 or 40% less than the price of the peak of market peak, then you're supposed to taking care when, because the next cycle when it comes, if you suffering any of the risk on the car and you end up the project is destroyed and need to rebuild, then the insurance amount won't be sufficient. So that's why you need to be it's a very tactic, full replacement cost plus 15%, the limit. And the FIDIC 99 also talking about the similar word. The insured, it should be joint name with the employer and the contractor. Again, the same for FIDIC 99. The coverage is for the care of the works for material and plant, including like also damage there too. Again, the same FIDIC 99. The risk is all against all risk except the employer. If you look at the FIDIC, there are 8 risks which is categorized as employee risk. Just categorize as employee risk, and out of this 8 risk, the bottom 4 you're supposed to cover in the car policy as per FIDIC 87. And FIDIC 99, similar to that. The time is till TOC, and for contractor only when working during DLP. Time limit again, same till TOC. So this is the summary of car policy, which is contractual risk policy. What you supposed to cover all the risk, including the employer. The second 4, like you have 8 risk, employer risk. Not the first 4, the second 4 also to be covered. But let's look at the general extension and exclusion in the car policy. Usually in car policy, you need to have certain extension, which is the requirement for the contractor to have a benefit of certain risky forecast or E4C. The MRE 002 extension is purely cross liability clause. The cross liability is a clause which insurance company is really keen on. They try to have this clause to show that because we need to have a joint name car policy. So what they're trying to say, this will be considered each party has their own insurance clause, like own insurance policy. The employee will have its own insurance policy and the contractor will have its own insurance policy. So this one policy will be treated as 2 policy. So this is what cross liability clause is all about. Now, to overcome the risk, we need to have a clause which is the problem with this cross liability clause. If something happens due to the employer fault at site, okay, you have a valid claim. What insurance company will do, they will pay for you and will claim it from the client, which is the employer, because they caused this damage. So this is the reason insurance company and try to have cross liability clause on any policy. So to waive this, we need to have waiver of subrogation. The waiver of subrogation means the insurance company cannot anymore try to have a cross claim against the party who already insured in the joint name. So even if the employee caused the damage, the insurance company cannot go to the employer and ask the damage. So it's they waived. Waiver of subrogation will fill this gap, cross liability. Then we got some few additional cover, which extension, we call it extension, to have certain kind of risk. If you have a like inland transit clause, air freight due to urgency of the material to be delivered on site, you will have air freight limit up to 10% of the claim amount. Then we have a site storage clause, because usually car means your complete works, which is the site which is already on build and plus material and plant, but the off-site there might be a storage, so you can have a cover on this with the extension clause. Then usually riot, strikes, civil commotion all excluded in the car, but when you have extension, you can limit this with the amount and probability of having secured certain potential risk if you have a right at site. So these are possible extension, which MRE 001. What MRE is the Munich rewording, certain like a FIDIC for the construction contract. For the insurance, we have standard forms of insurance clauses. The majority of the engineering insurance, engineering-related insurance, not the liability one, engineering-related insurance comes from Munich reinsurance company. That's why we call it MRE 002. It's similar to like FIDIC, like when you have a FIDIC contract for construction, that's everyone is familiar. Like MRE 001, when you say MRE 001, everyone is in industry is familiar, which is Munich rewording for strike, riot, commotion. So you don't need to really read every time when you see MRE 001. So to maintain the standards, it has its own reference for the clause. Then we got designer risk. What a designer risk cover in the extension is designer risk. You will have under 5 categories, depending on the how the insurance company is dealing with. It's 5 categories. Otherwise, Munich standard, it has 3 categories. We'll go leg 1, leg 2, leg 3. And other firms like Lloyd's and all, they categorize under 5 categories. But the similar leg 1, leg 2, leg 3, similar to that, they've categorized. But what has been covered in MRI 115 is simply if a design is the defective and it causes damage, it fall, it collapse, and cause damage to the other part of works which is not defective design, the replacement of those portion is covered with this MRE 115. So this is the pure extension for the contractual risk policy, even though design risk is always with the designer, but the design defect caused the damage to the other portion of the work, which is covered with the MRE 115 extension. Then you have a vibration and weakening support with the extension of MRE 120. So what you need to do is simply you need to list down all your potential risk and hazard to the project and try to cover with the extension as much as possible. So you will avoid ending up certain risk which is not covered in the insurance. This is the pure intention of covering this subject together with the risk assessment. And you have a standard exclusion in car policy. This cannot be amended, but you might have certain extension to that in order to cover portion of that. The standard exclusion includes war, invasion, act of foreign enemy, terrorism, and all. These all been standard exclusion. You cannot have a cover for this. Then we got nuclear reaction and radioactive contamination. This is purely excluded in any of car standard policy under Munich rewording. Then you got willful act, willful negligence of the insured. If you cause negligently damage to the works, even though car is covered to the works and plant and machineries, but the willful negligence is not covered. Then the interesting part is the cessation of work, whether partial or total. This is a very interesting point. If you have a suspension in your contract, you need to be more specific to notify the insurance company there is a regular suspension, regular interval, project will on hold for 3 months, then restart again. If this is the nature, then you need to be informed the insurance company. Otherwise, when you have a suspension order issued, that moment, this car policy will become inactive unless you have an extension again to say in this portion of part, suspension is covered up to 30 days, 90 days, or depend on the extension cover. Otherwise, in general exclusion, when you suspend the works, the car will be stopped, also be suspended. So be careful on this extension provision. You can deal many of the risk under extension section. Usually it doesn't cover and the exclusion, and you need to make sure that you extend to cover certain risk. This is why you need to do the risk assessment and to see what potentially could cause harm to your project to cover as much as under insurance. Coming to the special exclusion in car policy, you have a deductible which is excluded, you have a consequential loss which is excluded, and loss or damage directly, indirectly caused by fault, defect, error, omission in design, which is again talking about the design damage is not covered, but there is extension possible MRE 115. This is purely not for the defective design causing damage to the work which is executed correctly. So that MRE 115 limited cover only, but do you have a PI insurance? We will discuss in detail. Then the cost of rectifying, replacing defective material, this is not covered again. Also damage due to wear or tear gradual. So when you use the construction, once it's concluded, the client is occupying. When you have a loss of damage due to normal wear and tear, it's not covered. Then you have a loss of damage to vehicle license, general road use of waterborne vessels or aircraft, which is not covered. Loss of damage to files flowing. This is loss of any documents is not covered. And loss of damage discovered only at time of taking inventory, which is not covered. The G&H, loss of damage to file, loss of damage to inventory, these can be extended. This can be extended, and design portion, which is already extended with MRE 1/5 for the limited. Whatever excluded, you can still have extension, but with the limited extension. This is for the car insurance, contractual risk insurance. But we can have a full detailed discussion on the insurance, indemnity, and the limitation of liability, which will be like a very big area. Each of them is connected, but totally entirely is different. But we can have a more clarity when we discuss purely on those subjects, if opportunity comes. Now coming to the insurance, we have now, as we said, there is specific insurance for the third party liability. We can categorize under two: third party all person, third party properties. Now this is again, you have a limit in the appendix tender. Under FIDIC forms of contract, you have a limit. You need to comply with the limit. And again, this to be insured in joint names. And the coverage is safety of all persons should be covered. All person means including the people on site, people off site, people working close to the site. So this will be the plot limit of the project plus close proximity. And the risk caused by any reason, excluding the four exception. There are four exceptions which the client carry this risk and which can be excluded in the third party liability. And the time, there is no limit. Once the contractor conclude the work, the client will take over the project, and the client supposed to have public liability insurance. So there is no time limit mentioned. Usually the project will have frequent milestones and partial taken over provision. So there is no time limit. This will be dealt as per the requirement on site. This is for the safety of all persons. And again, for the property, the similar nature. But what we can see here, there is specific 6 categories which could cause damage to the third party property or third party persons, including the people at site. These are the 6 categories which potentially could result a claim under third party liability insurance. First one is the collapse. Second one is subsidence. Third one, heave. Fourth one is vibration. The fifth one, weakening or removal of support. Sixth one, lowering of groundwater. These are the 6 possible categories which could cause damage to the third party property or third party persons, including the people on site. Other than that, there are many more, but these are the 6 possible general events that could possibly result claim under third party insurance. The key exclusion in third party liability insurance, you just need to be very careful on this. Whatever caused by the negligence act by the contractor is not covered, because when the contractor negligent, always negligence is excluded in the insurance policy. So this is supposed to be covered with the contractor own public liability insurance. This will not be covered under third party liability insurance, which is connected to the car policy. We can say the example for this: removal of support due to deep excavation below the depth of adjoining foundation. Okay, when the contractor go deep and is going deep in excavation, and there is already adjoining foundation. Okay, when he remove the support, okay, whatever, if it cause or result damage to the property, adjoining property, which is not covered because the contractor is negligent on his own. So this is one of the exclusion. Even though he has a third party insurance, this will not be covered by insurance policy, and the insurance company will not pay for this such damage. Second, in nature, due to error or omission in design. Usually, if the design is defective This will not be covered in third-party liability. This is supposed to be covered by designer professional indemnity insurance. Usually, if there is a collapse caused by incorrect shoring design, even though you have a third-party liability which is covered third-party property also, they will not pay for this because this is purely due to the omission in design. Third one, which could be excluded under third-party liability, something you can reasonably foresee. If you can reasonably foresee, this is likely to cause the damage to the third party, property or persons. This will not be paid or entertained by the third party liability insurance. Because if you can, something if you can foresee, okay, you can't claim under insurance. Something which you cannot foresee, it happens like accidentally. This is the only thing covered in the insurance policy. So these are three key exclusion in third-party liability insurance, other than what we discussed in the car policy, what has been excluded. This is for the third-party liability. And coming to the coverage, what's supposed to be covered under third-party liability, you can see this, the first one, vibration damage to nearby properties by piling. Distance from the piling hammer considered safe based on industry standards and guidance, no contractor negligence. Okay, when you cause piling, when you do the piling, okay, the vibration which is caused to the damage, but this is purely when you consider the safety standard and industry standards, the piling hammer considers very safe. There is no negligence from the contractor. So as long as you prove there is no negligence, you have followed the standards set out in rated BS standards and all, then you cannot prove a negligence. Then this will be covered under public liability insurance. And similar one is the vibration caused discharge to chimney. When you do the vibration on the building on the next adjoining building and the crack appear, the chimney is something like damaged. Okay, this is covered because this cannot be foreseen. Okay, and you followed all the standard which is set out by national standards, and this needs to be covered under third party liability. And removal of support due to defective material within the steel pile wall, that support based on excavation. Okay, if we are causing damage, when you remove the support from the shoring, and it's proven that shoring design is not the negligent design, there is no defect in the shoring design, and again this is covered. When you have a removal, when you remove, this cause damage to the adjoining property, okay, due to the reason of the safety, this needs to be covered. You cannot foresee, and the design is perfectly designed, this needs to be covered under contractor risk policy. These are a few case areas, since we consider the exclusion and what possibly covered also we have discussed here. Now coming to the third party liability, we need to more go on because there are 6 categories we said possibly claim come under. Usually the methods are very important. When you discuss with the execution team, contracting execution team, so as a QS, you need to list down all the possible risk that could cause to the project. Accordingly, you can have a perfect insurance policy in place for certain risk. For example, if you are demolishing, okay, and the demolition method itself could give an indication what's supposed to cover, what cover you're supposed to have in third-party liability. If you have an end machine explosive, if it's end demolition, you don't need any special coverage, but it's explosive, then you need to take care very much on the potential risk. Vibration, weakening, or removal of support. If you are removing the support, is it through vibration or you simply removing using the machineries? And is it close to the city center or is it far from the city center? It depends on. If it's close to the city center, you might have the very highly costly buildings and towers, and you need to be taking care of all of these when you limit your third party liability, the insurance amount. So this is the consideration you need to have when you have especially demolition activity. Then coming to the piling activity, you need to have the again, it's linked to the method statement. And if you are causing method driven, it will cause vibration. And if you are considering auger method and less vibration, and if you have adjoining property and it might cause any damage to the adjoining property which is inevitable. You can simply foresee. So these are things you need to take in care. If something you can foresee which is not covered, so accordingly you need to set your safety standard and all the risk assessment in place. Then coming to the excavation, again, it's depend on many factors, and you need to see whether is there any close proximity, any property or expensive like a museum, and those kind of properties that they depend on that. You need to have procured your insurance respectively a higher premium will cost you. And is there any additional support basement level you need? If you have a basement next to your construction building, if you have a basement, if when you do the excavation, you need to consider whether you need to have any safety additional support for the existing basement. This might cost you in you need to price for the tender, and also this might cause you from a potential risk, and you need to procure the respective insurance. So accordingly, you need to have a few things in mind as a QS when you do the risk assessment. Coming to the very famous Windsor Park collapse, there was in UK, there is one, the debate was went on in 2016 and 17, still the case is going on. It's due to there is a big, like all close to the west end is witnessed, and the people are claiming that this is due to the construction activity which was excavated, which caused the impact on the proximity to the construction site. So this is if there is something similar to as we discussed like previously also, if it's close to the uh, city center area, and you need to be very careful when you do the excavation. This might have an impact on after 20-25 meter from the site, some certain impact. So all of this methodology and the risk you need to assess accordingly. You need to limit your third party liability limit for the insurance amount. Again, for the dewatering, you need to see dewatering level, how you're going to do the dewatering, and if there are possibility for ground settlement or structural movement due to this water table rising and flowing. All of this needs to be technically discussed, and you need to list down all the potential risk. Accordingly, you need to decide how much the coverage you're supposed to take for the third party liability insurance. And this is more important. You need to make sure that you follow all the safety standards in place. The second, when you list this risk, you need to take action, either you to mitigate or you need to transfer. The one pure form of insurance is the risk transfer. You're transferring your risk to the insurance company, and you're paying this with a premium. So there is a cost involved in for that. Now again, for the ground compaction, if you have a ground compaction, so how are you going to do it? It will have impact on the risk level and risk categories. And ground injection, you do the ground injection, or you're going to have a vibro compaction. All of them might cause different risk level. Accordingly, you might have the insurance coverage for different risk. Now coming to the contractor and own subcontractor workman staff, this is already covered with the workman compensation policy from the contractor and subcontractor side. And again, this is we don't need to discuss in detail. This is a general policy. They're supposed to cover workman compensation, but there is an indemnity provision. The contractor need to give indemnity to the employer, and we will discuss in question and answer session how it could have an impact on the indemnity provision, how to deal with such issues. Coming to the again, this is workman compensation. Coming to the professional liability insurance, designated liability insurance. PI insurance, we call it professional liability insurance, is the PI insurance. And the designated liability is legal requirement, but there are now insurance in place. You can procure it in designated liability insurance. What is the difference between these two is professional liability comes with a certain limit. It doesn't cover overall complete project cost. Maybe you will have a project for 50 million or 500 million, but the PI will maybe approximately 20 million, 10 million, you will have a PI cover. So it won't be the total same cost as the project cost, but designated liability, it will be a complete replacement cost. If the building collapse due to any reason, you don't need to prove, but designated liability insurance will give a total amount to completely rebuilding the new buildings. So this is the total one different. The second is the insuring party. Insuring party is the professional liability insurance. The person who design, for the firm who design, they will provide the PI insurance, but the designated liability, the joint insurance with the contractor, the designer, leading designer will take care of the insurance together with them, and designer will play the supervisory role on the insurer. The coverage is, as we discussed, is PI is limited. Designated liability is set to the full cost of total project cost or reinstatement cost, we can say, or rebuild cost. The risk is any reason for designated liability. For PI insurance, you need to prove that there is a professional negligence or there is a professional incompetence play a role for that. And the duration time, PI insurance operate on claim made basis. Okay, there is risk, potential risk. If you have a PI insurance from one designer, they go bankrupt, or second year, third year, they didn't review PI policy and there is no continuity, then you will face an issues. But the designated liability insurance come with 3 plus 10 years. So 13 years, you will have a cover for the designated liability. If there is any complete collapse, then it's covered under designated liability. This is the basic difference between professional liability insurance and designated liability insurance. Again, designated liability, even if you have insurance, you don't have insurance, under law, you already have obligation. If there is a collapse in the building, jointly designer and the contractor who build that, jointly liable, and the insurance is there for the benefit of designer and the contractor and no role for employer. But professional liability, professional indemnity insurance is the insurance as per the contract requirement. There is a limit already placed in the contract. Accordingly, you have to procure it. But if there is no contractual requirement also, as a professional, you're supposed to have PI insurance. If you face any challenges on your negligence to support your unforeseen cost, you're supposed to have PI insurance. Then we got product liability insurance. Is the product produced manufacturer, usually they submit their policy. Usually if you have a glaze and the glass itself produced by different manufacturer, they will have their liability, product liability insurance, and they will support with a copy of this policy. If there is the leakage during rainy season, okay, if it's found to be defective of the glass panel, okay, you can have a claim under product liability insurance because there is no defect in design, there is no defect in construction, because the defect itself in the material. So the claim under product liability insurance, you have to make a claim under this. So this is product liability insurance. Then we got, as I discussed previously, you got different categories of design coverage in insurance terms. These all are under insurance terms. There is no reference to FIDIC and all. Certain insurance, reinsurance company, they categorize up to 5, and Munich and Standard reinsurance company, they categorize leg 1, leg 2, leg 3. This is purely, if you have a leg 3, okay, this purely leg 3 is the highest quality you can have for the design liability. This is covered complete defective design, also defective design which is cause damage to the property. So this is usually the PI range. The PI range you will have highest range leg 3, and the leg 1 is the MRE 1/5, which is the cover we could expect under contractor all risk policy, and the DE5 similar to leg 3, which is purely the highest standard for the design risk for the insurance requirement, which is provide cover for both defective and non-defective property, provided that there is damage to non-defective insurance property. So this cover your defective design which cause the damage, and also the non-defective part, both is covered under DE5 and similar to leg 3. This is similar to leg 3 requirement. Now coming to the final portion, let me start with the sample APC questions which you might encounter, and I will give an opportunity to ask a question from your side, and I will keep updating our time. We already approached 2 hours now, almost. Let me start with the questions, and following my similar sample question, I will take few questions from your side, and let's move on from there. The panel APC assessor might ask, can you please explain how you address the health and safety issues prior to construction in refurbishing building? So when they call it like keyword like refurbishment, they're expecting the building already existing and it's a refurbishment. So you need to start with like the sentence has been written like as if I'm informing to, or I am advising to others. I started to realize during the pre-construction phase that client was unfamiliar with the construction sector, and these were the first three from information. You should familiar with the safety standard. Okay, first of all, this is a sample question and sample answer regards to the UK standard. There is a CDM regulation in place, okay, and accordingly, but in UAE context, in Qatar context, what we have to say, refurbishment is a refurbishment. So there is a safety standard. We need to have all the safety stand in place. Coming to the safety, first of all, you will have a in and exit accordingly in the signs also. Especially you need to protect, it's a refurbishment, you need to protect already the things which are not going to be carried out, and the protection needs to be taken care, and accordingly you need to have a signs in place for clarity of communications. These are things we will discuss, health and safety standard in and out, uh, similar methods. Then the second questions, please describe how you deal with the during the construction of building. By this is general questions. How do you deal with safety issues during construction of building? During safety construction, usually the method statement comes in first place with the health and safety standards. Okay, in method statement, all the activity comes with certain risk identification, risk assessment together with method statement. All the activity will start with the general safety standard, which is the PP, personal protective equipment, and this will be followed with the work specific health and safety standard. This how you should initiate your discussion on the how do you deal with health and safety issues during construction. So you'll start with the personal protective equipment, and the respective trade, they will have a certain safety standards. You will always have uh, toolbox talk, and accordingly you'll start the activity. Then there is a method statement which needs to be followed. There is checklist in place in method statement. So accordingly, you'll make sure health and safety in place, and there'll be a safety team at site. Okay, they are monitoring the safety always and on site. So you'll connect all this as a point to answer comprehensive answer. Then coming to the third question, a sample question on the project described in your critical analysis. This depends on one critical analysis. There is a sample question. How the safety standard when undertaking your work during the project. So how do you make sure that you are delivering safety standard which is set out in the contract and the legal requirement? You will make sure there is always PP in place. There is site signage, site induction going on. Then they have a safety team in place. There is a safety standard documents, risk register, risk assessment in place, and the contractor method statement comes with hazard identification. All of them will be like, you make sure these are the documents you will be very keen to look at to make sure that the project are running with the safety standards. Then as a QS, there might be a question you might ask. As a QS on site, you notice safety violation. How could you deal with this? What you will do, as we discussed, safety is everyone responsible. Each and individual is responsible for their own safety as well as others. So you will go to there and you'll stop immediately the activity. You can inform the safety officer at site and report to them. And if the incident keep continuing, you can write as engineer NCR, and if there is no response from the contractor, you can payment certificate, you can withhold certain money for the NCR, because when engineer instruct on any reason, the contractor must obey. If there is a resistance from the contractor, you can hold a certain amount in the PCs until the NCR is closed. These are the way as a QS you can respond to the safety violation at site. And insurance related question, you can have like two questions, as I said. In the workman compensation policy, the contractor, if he has his own workman compensation policy, what has been covered, the contractor workman is covered. But for example, on site, there might be contractors who are directly contracted by the client. So if they cause damage, okay, if they cause damage and to the main contractor on site or main contractor on site staff, what will happen? What will happen is workman compensation, okay, will pay for that. There is no issue because they still, when they executing the work, the damage has been happened. But the workman, if they challenge in the court, okay, in the arbitration, the damage happens due to the subcontractor who is appointed by the client. They have a direct contract. Because of his negligence, I got a damage and I lose my leg, my hands. Okay, what will happen? There's an indemnity in policy in FIDIC. Indemnity is the indemnity. The main contractor makes sure he is providing indemnity to the main the client, and the client will not pay any legal expenses. But if insurance company, okay, the workman compensation doesn't indemnify, what will happen? What will happen? The legal case will come into the picture, and the main contractor needs to step in on behalf of the client and take over because contractually he signed the indemnity provisions. So this unnecessary headache in the workman compensation, you can simply ask indemnity provision for the respective project and indemnify the client. You can avoid such litigation process and he needs to go through. And that could be another scenario for the insurance. For example, if the crane due to heavy wind fall on the building, is it covered under car? If there is advice is seek from your side, then you need to see the tower crane is not the cover under car. Usually tower crane comes under contractor equipment, which is to be insured under separate insurance. Unless you insure under car also the equipment, okay, whatever caused by the crane will not be covered under car. So this is the advice you're supposed to give. And now I let the participant to ask questions. Then I can start to have a look and now coming to the question which I'm reading with regards to the health and safety in construction industry. Rashidi Muhammad, since the pandemic still around and the contractor are incurring higher costs than expected, can the main contractor claim for additional time and cost under FIDIC 87? This is the question. It's depend how if it's pure form of FIDIC, it's pure form of FIDIC, there is a special circumstance, but again, depend on other provision also. In 70.1 and 2, that's deal with subsequent legislation. If the authority is insisting on certain proactive measures which needs to be taken care, so additional cost can be claimed under 70.1 and 2, and the additional time can be claimed under special circumstance. Again, it's depend on your pure, your contractual amendment. If there is any modification to that, accordingly it will be deal. But there is a possibility you can see 70.1 and 2 for the cost part, and the time part you can see special circumstance. Then there's another question from Distikar Mahmood. Is limit for the car policy is limited to the boundary of the project? And if any additional works awarded to the contract which is beyond the project boundary as variation through MOE where overall budget is not exceeded, is required to amend the car policy to include additional works beyond the project boundary. This is again good question. Car policy usually comes with certain exclusion. One of the exclusion is clearly it's exclude any material changes to the project. The material changes include the variation. If the variations, okay, all the variation for the best practice, all the variation should be notified to the insurance company. Accordingly, they will be updated their records. If you signing a new variation order, which is in different plots, you need to obtain endorsement from the insurance company specifying different plot numbers. So you will not be disappointed if there is any claim comes. So this is the best practice. You need to always inform if there is any material change to the project, even if you receive like this scope, even to be informed to the insurance company, because that is also material change. And also you need to keep remind that there is a suspension provision. There is a partial cessation also will end car policy to be active. So this will also cease the activation of car policy. So whatever we discuss now here, if there is any material change, you need to inform the insurance company. Now coming to the Roy Raju, can the engineer ask for compensation from contractor if damage caused by poor safety by the contractor? Will insurance cover for such damage? Okay, if damage caused by poor safety by the contractor, as we discussed under general exclusion, negligence is not covered. Okay, if the insurance company can prove that, okay, the contractor on his own negligence in terms of health and safety requirement, proper safety standards, they can reject the claim. And the insurance cover such damage. Will insurance cover? Insurance will not cover such damage if they can prove that the contractor is negligent. Okay, and the client will not pay for this, and the contractor on his own is to bear the cost. Is there any other questions in place? These are the 3 questions I received so far. Okay, there's a question comes, appreciate more clarification on DIN and leg. I can clarify more on this. I was running out of time and I need to rush to complete in 2 hours to take more questions. And I can go on this. And DE, simply as I said, there are reinsurance companies and they defined and design insurance coverage. Monique comes with leg standard, leg 1, leg 2, leg 3, and everyone in the industry, they understood this. Leg 3 is the highest standard in terms of coverage. You will have cover for defective design, also non-defective, if it causes damage to the non-defective portions. So D1, 2, 3, 4, 5. D5 is a similar range, again, similar to leg 3, but the D5 also provide similar to leg 3, but D1 start with, if you read the table, exclude all loss damage due to defective design, material or workmanship. Simply, if you have DE1 clause, okay, what has been covered is simply not the defective design, not the defective material, not the workmanship, what has been caused by them. So small portion is covered. DE2 is similar to, range but extended cover. DE3 similar range with extended cover. DE4 similar range with extended cover close to DE5. Which insurance exactly cover for contractor equipment? There is a contractor equipment, plant and machinery insurance. This is cover contractor equipment. But coming to the specific project, okay, you might have insurance policy for contractor equipment and plant with different insurance company, but you will have a car policy with different insurance company. What will happen? Like example, I told you tow crane. If tow crane broke down and fall, okay, you have insurance for that with the different insurance company. The car insurance policy, you will have this different insurance company. Simply car policy exclude the equipment and they will reject the claim, and tower crane, they will pay for the limit, which is for the contractor equipment and machinery, which is the smaller limit. So the best practice is always obtain contractor equipment also as a part of car policy, even for the small portion of amount, which are the plant and equipment active at site, which is small amount. And to make sure you bring everything under one insurance company and one umbrella. So this way you can avoid such case. Any other questions? How to justify the construction insurance claim? Is there any document like we are getting the police report to justify the motor insurance? And we will take one more question following this, if there is anything, and we will end up because we are running out of time. The moment you have an insurance claim, let's say you have a fire, okay, and your fire is covered under car, and what you need to report immediately, fire, you need to report to the police and respective authority. And accordingly, you need to start, there's standard forms. When you sign the insurance contract with the insurance company, there are standard forms. So you fill out the forms, attach the relevant photographs, and submit to them as a preliminary report. With that, you will have all the ingredients like the date, time, the reason for the incidents, and the photos attached, inform time to the police and all, and the estimated impact on this. This is very tentative. Like early stage, you provide like host plan, this will be interview, and accordingly the insurance company will register this claim, and time to time they will keep updating on the actual outcome of the case. Nothing else required, because you need to follow simply the template set out by the insurance company. Anything else? In UAE, decisional liability is applicable. It's the last question I'm going to take. Following this, we will stop and we will conclude our presentation for today, health and safety. In UAE, decisional liability is applicable as per civil code. So special decisional liability insurance is mandatory for project. It's a mandatory requirement, it's a legal requirement. It doesn't mean that you need to take insurance. Usually, when you go for a decisional liability insurance, which is the highest premium you should pay for the insurance, the highest in terms of premium, usually when you have 100 million contract and 100 million worth of project, you might paying end up 10% of the construction cost as a premium. So we're talking about 10 million. So it's up to your company. If you want to take out the each and every project decisional liability insurance, it's going to cost you too much. So it's your call, and even it's not a mandatory requirement to take insurance so far. And but even if you take insurance, if you don't take insurance, under legal liability, you are liable as a contractor, as a designer. There's a question comes, is it possible to share presentation? Of course, I will share with you following this presentation. You can email me. I will reply to your email attaching this presentation. Thank you so much for your time. I hope I try to finish whatever we set out as a learning outcome, and I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you. Thank you for your time.